Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome into another exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And I am so thrilled of all days that you're joining us today because this is one of our very first broadcasts of the entire school year. Last year, we did over 400 programs with the coolest scientists and explorers on planet Earth. This is my first time hosting this school year, and I'm so excited to welcome you all back to the classroom. Now, honestly, you couldn't be joining us for a better first show because we are joined live in the UK by Polar Preet Chandi. She is an author, a physiotherapist, a British Army officer, and an endurance athlete adventurer whose hiking and climbing expeditions have taken her to all 7 continents. Now, today, as you may have seen when you signed up for today's program, she is going to talk about her most amazing adventure of all. Indeed, one of the most amazing adventures that any human being can do on planet Earth, which is skiing solo and unsupported to the South Pole, as one does. It's a very exciting journey, and I'm so excited to bring her in to explain a little bit more about it. Now, I do want to note we are going to have a Kahoot today, so if you want to play it along with a little 4-question quiz between our talk and Q&A, you can pull up this game pin in about 20-25 minutes, and we're going to do that together. I'll be sharing that a few more times throughout the broadcast. I'm going to bring you in now, Preet, because I'm so excited to get to meet you and have you on today. It's so thrilling to have you. And I've got to start with something, which is that I have done 1,200, 1,500 broadcasts at this point over the last few years. I've seen many thousands of pictures of explorers and adventurers. And usually when people are pushing the boundaries of like human physicality and limits, they look haggard, they're tired, they're sore, they're covered in ice. And in every single picture of you, you are grinning ear to ear. There is no one on earth who is happier to be out and about in the wilderness than you. So I'm so thrilled to have you. This is great.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to speak to you all today. So as mentioned, my name is Preet Chandi, and I have done a few pretty cool adventures that I'm going to talk to you about. Now, Polar Preet is basically a nickname that I created because I knew I wanted to go to the polar worlds. So that's Antarctica, and I've been to the Arctic as well. And yes, people still ask me if my name is Polar. Now, I was writing some nicknames down on a board, and if anyone has seen the movie Happy Feet, my other potential name was going to be Happy Preet. I thought maybe not everybody understands that. So we went with Polar Preet. Now, a little bit about me. So I'm in the British Army as a physiotherapist. I joined the army when I was 19 years old because I saw an advert in my local town centre. And I didn't really know much about it, but everybody was smiling on the poster. So I thought that was a good sign. And then in the middle there's an image of me in Antarctica. Now, I've done 3 big expeditions in Antarctica, and they've been solo. So I'm on my own and unsupported. And that means I'm carrying all of my kit and equipment with me in that sled you can see in the picture. Now, people always ask if you're on your own, who took the photos? And there was a pilot and a co-pilot in that plane there, and they took this photo for me before they left. And then there's another image there, and I'm carrying a tire. Now, for my training, I would carry and drag tires, and I would use the same harness system that I had in Antarctica. And I was very creative when I named my tires, and I called them Tire 1 and Tire 2. I know, brilliant names I've got there. So a little bit about my background again. So I like endurance events. So basically, I like the long events. Now, why do I like these events? Because personally, I think I can keep going. I'm not the quickest and I was never the strongest, but I knew when it got hard that I could keep going. Now, you can see that I'm smiling in these photos. And actually, as Jessie just mentioned, that I was smiling in the first photo as well. Now, these events were really hard. One was 40 miles, and that's me in my army uniform, and I'm carrying quite a lot of weight in that backpack. And the other one was in the desert, in Morocco, in the Sahara Desert. And it was, again, quite a few days and long distances, about 156 miles in total. But I'm smiling. Does that mean I was happy all the way around? I actually don't think so. I think I just saw the camera person at the exact right moment and then smiled for the photo. But they were pretty difficult. Now, one thing I've learned while doing these trips is the more we do, the more we realize we're capable of. And I kept doing a little bit more and a little bit more. And then eventually I was looking for something. I thought, I really want to do something big that's not only going to inspire me to push my boundaries more, but hopefully inspire other people too. So I decided to go to Antarctica. Now, as mentioned, I've been lucky enough to go to all of the continents, which is very, very cool. Now, at the moment, I'm in Europe, so the blue there at the top of the map, and I had to make my way to Antarctica. A lot of you, I think, are from North America watching this, so the green area on the map. Now, have a look at that map, and do you know which way I would have gone to get to Antarctica? So I went to the airport in London, so in England. Now, do you think I could have got a flight straight to Antarctica? Sadly not. So I had to go through another continent. One of the continents we commonly go through to get to Antarctica is South America. Now, there's a country, a long country right at the bottom of South America, and that's called Chile. So I went to Chile and I stayed in Chile for about a week to pack all of my kit and equipment. And then there's another country that you can get to Antarctica from there as well. And it's very close to Chile, right at the edge again, and that is Argentina. Now, the reason I spent a week there to prepare all of my kit and equipment is I had quite a lot of stuff. So I did things like chop my toothbrush in half. I took the labels out of my clothing. Now, why would I do those things? Because do you remember I said my kit in Antarctica, I was unsupported, which means I carry all of my kit and equipment with me. Now, on my second trip, which was my biggest trip, and I'll talk about, my sled weighed 120 kilograms. That is double my weight. So it was pretty heavy. So I wanted to reduce weight wherever I could. And that's why I tried to get rid of any tiny bit of weight and even chop my toothbrush in half. And what's actually funny, on my first trip, after chopping my toothbrush in half, it then snapped when I was on the ice. So then I had to tape those two little bits together so that I could continue brushing my teeth. And from Chile, I then flew to Antarctica. Not, if you can see my mouse, not too far from the tip there, the edge of the landmass, and to a place called Union Glacier. And I was in a camp there for a few days before I start my trip. Now, this is a map going into Antarctica. Now, Antarctica is huge. And why did I want to go there? This place that I knew absolutely nothing about. Well, remember when I said, I think the more we do, the more we realize we're capable of. And I was looking for something big that I could potentially achieve. And one of my old bosses in the army said to me, "What about Antarctica?" And I thought, absolutely no chance. I know absolutely nothing about Antarctica. And then it stuck in my mind. How amazing would it be to go and do something that I don't know anything about? So as a modern day explorer, I started on Google. And I genuinely typed in a few years ago, how do you get to Antarctica? And as you can imagine, I saw lots of different things. And then I typed in Polar Explorer. And I saw loads of people on Google Images that didn't look anything like me at all. And they all had these like really rugged photos and these jackets with the fur ruff. And I thought, they don't look anything like me at all. And I didn't really know where to start. So I created Polar Preet. I created the website, the social media pages, and I started following anybody and everything that had anything to do with Antarctica. Started doing my research and started speaking to people. I found a course online. Now, when I was telling people that I wanted to go to Antarctica, I think a lot of people were like, okay, and had no idea what I was talking about. And people would often ask me, was I inspired by Shackleton, Amundsen, and Scott? Now, these are big names in the polar community. They're quite famous polar explorers, but I didn't know anything about them. And when they asked me, I would say, yes, yeah, I was inspired by them. And when actually I didn't know anything about them at all. And I'd even written it on my website, inspired by Shackleton, Amundsen, and Scott. And I think that's because I felt pressure of having to come from the same path as other people. And if other people thought I was inspired by them, and that's why I wanted to go, then I should be. And then I realized that I just wanted to be honest, and I wrote inspired by wanting to do something different, because I didn't know anything about this. And people would say to me, Preet, it's not the right time to go and do this trip, which was correct, but it never really is the right time to do a lot of things. They said, Preet, you don't have enough experience. Now, that was very true. I didn't have enough experience, but I do not see that as a negative thing. Have a think about what you do when you don't have enough experience. That's right. I went to get the experience. And finally, I was told, Preet, you do not look like a polar explorer. Now, remember I said I looked at those Google images? They were right. I didn't look like any of the people on those images. But I thought to myself, what does a polar explorer look like? What does an engineer, a pilot, or a teacher look like? surely they could look like anything. So I continue to train and look for ways to get there. There's two images on this slide, and one is when I flew from Chile, so from a place called Punta Arenas to Union Glacier, which is where I was on my trip, and then I started very close by. So I decided I wanted to do a crossing of Antarctica, of the landmass, and I started training for that. I did a load of training for about a year and a half, and I applied to this logistics company because they're the people that are going to drop me off on the ice and then pick me up as well. And they rejected my application because I didn't have enough experience. And I remember, and if anybody has ever failed anything or had anything rejected, it doesn't feel great. And I thought to myself, what can I do? So I created phase 1. So the reason I went to Antarctica the first time was, and that journey finished in early 2022, was to show that I could do the bigger trip. So I did 700 miles solo, unsupported, to the South Pole. And then I came back and I filled out my application to do the crossing, and it was accepted. There's another image of my sled there in Antarctica, and that is of my niece Simran. So that's her name on the side there. She's 12 years old. And the reason I have her name there is she's a big part of my inspiration for wanting to push my boundaries. I was often told that I couldn't do a lot of things growing up. I didn't tell anybody in my family when I joined the army. I was told I wasn't smart enough to get into university. When Simran was born, I remember thinking, I want to show this little girl that she can go and achieve anything she wants. And often I was told, you have to stay in this little box that's been created for you. And then I soon realized, I could go and do loads of different things. I did not dream of Antarctica when I was a kid. I did not know anything about it. I started learning about it in 2020, and we're now 4 years along the way, and I've managed to do some pretty cool trips there, which I'm going to go into. So let's talk about the training. Whenever you need to do anything, whatever project, you have to do some preparation. And I hadn't been in conditions like this before. So this is me training in Norway. I know what you're thinking. Looks amazing. So this was my first experience in conditions like this. And it was really hard to get my phone out and take the video, and they got cold very, very quickly. Now, all of the people here were all individuals from all over the world that wanted to come and do this polar training course. And I remember going there thinking, I am starting from the beginning, I don't know any of this stuff. But I soon realized I had other skills from the army that helped me. So I knew how to read a map, and I knew how to use my compass, and all of those things were really helpful. And then I went there to learn as well. And it was great being in this group of people to learn some of the skills that I needed to go on my polar trip in Antarctica. This is me also training in Greenland. So Greenland's in the Arctic, and this is me trying to cross a crevasse. This is how not to do it.
So, part 1. Jump.
Now that is my 2 sleds in the crevasse. Luckily, I was able to pull them out and it was okay. But this preparation was really hard. I had this crazy idea to try, want to go to Antarctica. I emailed lots of people about it. A lot of people weren't really very interested, and it was really hard to get the funding. And I used a lot of my own funding to do these trips. I had to take leave from work to do them, and it was challenging. And I remember when I was finding it difficult, and I just had this little fire inside of me that I really wanted to get there. And this, I'll be honest, it wasn't really about Antarctica, because I only started learning about that in 2020. I wanted to do something big to show that if someone, like me from the middle of England can go and do something like this, an ordinary person, then anyone can go and achieve anything. But I want to be honest about the hardships, because it was very difficult to get to that start point. But I did make it. And a little bit more on the preparation. So there's two images on this slide. One is my cooking system in Antarctica, and the other one is 70 days of food. So I'm on my second trip now, trying to prepare all of my food. All of the food was taken out of its original packaging, and I did that for weight. And you can see some words written on the food there. And I wrote messages on each food bag that people had written on my website or social media, people that I didn't know. And I wrote their names on the message, so that when I was on the ice on my own, if I got a little bit lonely, I could remind myself that I wasn't alone, even though I was physically on the ice, that there were people on this journey with me. back to the picture that looks a little bit red. So my cooking system, there's actually a shovel in the corner there, and I would cut up blocks of snow. I would put them in my kettle, that's a stove, and I would heat up ice to get water. And that's how I would get all of my fluids. And then in the evening, I'd eat something called freeze-dried food. So the food has been dehydrated, it's much lighter. I put the hot water in it, stirred it, left it for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then I'd have an evening meal. And I was having 5,000 calories a day. So that is a lot of calories. And I still lost weight on every single trip that I've done out there. This is a standard day in Antarctica. So Antarctica is the windiest continent. It's very cold. I did have 24-hour daylight while I was there. So the Antarctic summer season is November to January. So this is actually the summer season that I'm there. And one of the questions, one of the facts actually I first learned was about polar bears in Antarctica, and I'm going to tell you the fact. So the word Arctic comes from the Greek word Arctus. That word means bears. So if Arctic means bears, what do you think Antarctica means? The word itself, Antarctica. Okay, I'm going to leave that with you and I'll come back to it at the end. But this trip was physically very difficult. I'm on my own carrying my sled, but also mentally it was really hard because you can see from the ground there, you can't really see anything in the distance. It all looks the same. So to navigate, I had a compass in front of me the entire time and I had a GPS. Now, without that small GPS, I wouldn't actually know exactly where I am. The GPS could tell me. And with the compass, that would give me the right direction. Now, you might think I'm just going south to the South Pole. It's not quite just one straight line because do you remember that crevasse we saw me trying to jump over in the Arctic? There are some crevasses and I want to stay away from those crevasses as much as possible. Now, it's easy to make mistakes when you're on adventure, and I'm going to tell you about one of mine. So the way I pack my toilet paper is in packs of 10 tissues, and I had 10 in my top left pocket, and then I had them in separate food bags, and my food bags were days 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, up into 70 days. Now, on day 11, I went into my bags to look for my toilet paper, and I couldn't find it. So where is it? So I looked in my next food bag, and it still wasn't there. And I had a little panic and I thought to myself, I cannot believe I've forgotten my toilet paper. So then for the next 40 days of this trip, I used snow, no toilet paper. Now, this was a really challenging journey and I was running behind time. So on day 50, I had to start rationing my food and I went to my last food bag. Guess what I found? That is correct. I found all of my toilet paper. And at that point, it just became funny and also a luxury because now I had lots of toilet paper for my last remaining 20 days. This is my sled upside down in Antarctica. The lines in the snow, they are called sastrugi and they are wind-shaped ridges. And we're in a low cloud environment here. So it's actually quite hard to see the ground there in this contrast. This sled still weighed over 100 kilograms when it tipped. And I was finding it really, really frustrating when this was happening. And often when I was finding it hard, I would do things like tell myself, you're doing really well, just keep going. And think about a time you're having when you're finding something difficult and think about what you do. Do you tell yourself good things? I try not to be mean to myself if I can. And I know that's sometimes quite hard, but a really good piece of advice someone gave me was treat yourself as you would your best friend. So sometimes I think about that and I try to treat my sled as my best friend, even though it can be very, very annoying sometimes. I flipped this sled over. I checked my fuel at the back. This happened 3 times. And then I had a little cry to myself because I was finding it really hard. And then I kept going. After that, I was like, you're doing really well. Keep going. Sometimes I would actually just count to 100 over and over again. So I'm in a whiteout here, and this is my compass in front of me. So like I said, I have my compass in front of me all of the time because it helps me know which direction I'm going in. And in a whiteout, you just cannot see anything in front of you, as in this image. And it's really difficult to concentrate. And like I said, physically, these trips were difficult, but mentally, it was very, very hard. And when I was finding it challenging, sometimes I'd actually listen to audiobooks. And I remember listening to one audiobook, and she said, this classroom was as cold as Antarctica. Sometimes when I'm finding things hard, I lose my sense of humor. And I was like, was it really? You know, I'm in Antarctica right now. Was your classroom really as cold as Antarctica? But it was pretty challenging at these points when you couldn't see anything in front of you. I'm actually going to show you a video now of me having quite a tough time on the ice.
So I've been told that my cut-off date is the 22nd of Jan, which I'm pretty gutted about because I don't think I've got enough time to make the end. I'm on the other side of the pole anyway, and I'm going to try and give it everything I have. Otherwise, just feeling pretty exhausted, really hard going with the heavy poke and conditions, but just going to keep going. We've only got like 14 days left until my cut-off date anyway, so might as well give it everything I have.
So as you can see, I'm not having a great time. I'm finding this journey really hard. I was skiing 13, 15 hours a day. I'm exhausted. I started rationing my food. I was in a lot of pain. I had a few injuries, one to my leg and one to my neck. And at this point, I've actually only got one tablet of pain relief left. And I had that for my last 14 days. And I was just struggling a lot. I was so tired and in a lot of pain. And I would just almost go over it again. And my counting got longer. So I would be like 1, and then I'd breathe a few times, 2. I'd breathe a few times. And there was a lot of that going on. So this is 2 images of the South Pole. Now, this is trip 1 and 2. And I think you can see the difference in my face. So one of them, I look really happy, and I've just finished what looks like a 40-day holiday. That is my first trip, where my mouse is going around now. And then this image here, I feel like you can see the strain in my face. Now, do you remember my second trip? I said I wanted to try and cross the landmass in Antarctica. So I actually went past the South Pole. Now, at the South Pole, you have actually quite a lot. You've got weather stations, you've got different camps set up. This is the ceremonial South Pole where this globe is. And then the geographical South Pole is just about 20 meters from this point, and it's a sign that says, "Welcome to the South Pole." But I had to go past the South Pole here, and I think I was, well, you can see my face. I was struggling a little bit, still smiling though. This is me having finished my 70-day trip, and I am happy because I've just been given some carbs, is what I'm eating. And what I didn't mention actually, in that 5,000 calories, I do have lots of different food groups, but I've got a lot of carbs, and then I've got protein and fat as well, but more carbs than anything else. Now, I've actually got a sock on my wrist there. And what I would do on the ice, I would change my socks every 15 days. That's treat day. And then my spare socks that I'd already used, I would then use for different repairs. So I've got that on my jacket because there's a rip there. Now, this crossing of Antarctica, I didn't actually make it. 70 days, 922 miles, and I failed to meet my end point. This is me at the end of that trip, having lost 20 kilograms of fat and muscle. And again, you can see extra socks on my leg where I had an injury. And I was so disappointed. Like, I was not doing great. And I've done 70 days. There was a lot of media attention on this trip, and I didn't make it. I failed. And I remember people said to me, "Preet, you didn't fail. You did such a great trip." But it's okay to fail. And I tell you what, it's the best failure I've ever had. So this is only last year that I finished this trip, early last year. I then had to have an operation on my leg for my injury. But I think sometimes it's good to fail, because actually I put myself way out my comfort zone and I pushed my boundaries, which is what I wanted to do. I actually did get 2 world records from this trip, even though I didn't make the end. I got the longest solo, unsupported, one-way polar ski expedition. I know that's really long for a female, and overall as well. But I know I didn't make my endpoint. You know, I was at 100 miles off that endpoint. And I think it's okay to be disappointed. I was still really proud of myself. And even if I knew I would fail 1,000 times over, I would still do that trip, because I got more from that than I think any of my successes. Now, that doesn't mean that we go into something thinking that, I'm going to fail this, but there's always that risk. And I think it also means that I'm doing something that's, hard, or I'm doing something that's out of my comfort zone. And I don't see that as a bad thing. So last year was a hard year for me. I was uncomfortable for a lot of it. I felt a little bit empty. I'd done this huge trip. I was exhausted, had surgery on my leg. And then I decided to go back to Antarctica, even though when I finished, I thought I'm not going to go back. And I actually went and got the female speed record. Do you remember I said the geographic South Pole? This is it, where that sign is there. But I went back and I got the female speed record. So the same trip as I did the first time round to the South Pole. And this is me at the South Pole. And it is a can of Coke Zero, which, as we know, is literally my favourite drink. So after 32 days, oh my God, that is actually bliss. That is so good. Oh, that's amazing. That is so good. That was worth the wait. So remember I told you about 24-hour daylight when I'm there. So this is about 2 in the morning. So you can't really tell it's in the morning. But I got the female speed record to the South Pole. So I did it in just over 31 days. And that was 700 miles. And the reason I think I did it so well is because of the failure of my last trip. Now, just take a second to let that sink in. So when I was on this last trip, which finished on the 28th of December, 6 months ago or so. And I remember when it got tough and I thought to myself, it's nowhere near as hard as the last one. Sometimes when you do something that's mentally difficult, you almost store that. And when you're doing something else hard, you can think about that. If I got through that, then I can do this next thing. This is a picture of my sled, and it's a little bit of my why. When people say, why did you go to Antarctica? And I think all of these trips are so much bigger than me. I ran a school competition for my second trip, and the winning logos are on the side of my sled. And I love taking people with me on these journeys. If you're interested, my website and stuff is on the last page, but I will be doing a school syllabus or competition next year as well, if anybody wants to join in. And then this is my final slide. So I wrote a kids book as well to try and encourage young people to go outside and just find adventure anywhere and everywhere. I said before, I didn't know anything about adventure, about this world or Antarctica up until a few years ago. And that's okay. Everybody starts somewhere. And we're all always learning. So thank you very, very much. Sorry, I've gone over my 20 minutes. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I think we're going to go on to the quiz now.
Oh, we sure are. And you can go as long as you'd like, Preet. That was spectacular. Thank you so much. And I really hope you sent that video to Coke so that they can sponsor your next expedition, because I would pay for you if you did something like that. That's fantastic. As you mentioned, we are going to dive in with our Kahoot before we go into our Q&A. So, Preet, if you want to come out of screen share so you can see us again, have a bit of a conversation, that would be lovely. And you can also help us with some of these Kahoot answers. So we've got 4 quick questions. Test your understanding. Have a little bit of fun, everybody. So I'm going to bring this up now, share my own screen, and then we're going to questions for you. So if you have any questions, keep them in your head. Keep them in your head. We'd love to hear from you in a minute. We're going to have ample time for that in just a few. I think some of our classes, all you guys are coming in as a whole class. That's awesome. So we're going to get underway with this. And for those who are new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. And what you win is Preet and I's everlasting respect. So with that said, we are going to get underway. And if you don't have Kahoot and you just want to yell out the answers in your class, that's totally cool too. But let's get started. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Now we talked about this specifically, true or false, or in a roundabout way. Preet had to worry about polar bears on her journey. She's wandering along. She had those ski poles and they could fend off the bear that was potentially coming. What do we think? Yes or no? Any polar bear worries or not? Get those answers in. Get those answers in. So yes, false, because Arctic, Arctos, bear, Antarctic, no bear. You asked that in the middle. We had some classes on YouTube. So thanks to Miss Course class. We're coming quickly with no bears there. That's awesome. Let's go to question 2. All right. Awesome Jaguars in our lead. this is half the fun of these things. And especially when we've got a conservation program and like the animal auto-generated name matches the creature that we're talking about, that always makes my day. So how long was the journey? So she's talking about a few journeys, but the sort of, we feature one at the beginning. We had a little map, 200 kilometers, 500 kilometers, 750 or over 1,000 kilometers. Let's get those answers in a few more seconds. Preet, 200 kilometers is nothing for you now. It's like a walk in the park. You do that in your sleep. Yes.
I'm like, I need to start talking kilometers. I'm like miles.
For our American friends, yes, sorry about that. But yes, over 1,000 kilometers, endless. It just keeps going. I'm trying to think, my province isn't even 1,000 kilometers across. I don't want to walk to St. John's. All right, so which country is one of the starting points for travel to Antarctica? She talked about a continent. So Canada, Russia, Argentina, or Namibia are our answers here. She talked about 2 countries, one of which is listed on this. They're both at the bottom of one of our continents. Where do you go when you're going to Antarctica? And worth noting too, you don't need to go to Antarctica and cross it with skis. I mean, that is the coolest possible way of doing it, literally and figuratively. But you can go to Antarctica as a tourist, and most people do leave from Argentina or Chile. Very good, everybody. All right. We got our final question, and then we are going to head to our Mr. Blondo's class joining us in Winnipeg. They're going to be our first question askers in a minute. Bright Raven has our lead going into our final question. Here we go. How did Preet navigate out on the ice? Intuition? Maybe? No? I don't know. The stars, looking up all the time, compass and GPS, or followed the bright lights at the South Pole. They got a big base there. It's really lit up. Maybe she just followed that, looked into the horizon. Maybe not. Yes, compass and GPS, those tools that have served us well for a long, long time, certainly in the case of the compass. Very good. You guys killed this on the Kahoot. Way to go. Let's see what our leaderboard is before we go to 2A04. And teachers, if you all want to unmute your mics, it'll make it easier when we're in Q&A, I promise. Snowy Lion in second, Smart Puffin in third, and first. For all the marbles, Bright Raven, way to go, everybody. Well, if you are any of those folks, let us know who you are in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And as I said, we're going to go to 2A04. If you guys want to unmute your microphone, come on in for our first question. DeWitt Middle School, you're coming up next. But let's see what's going on in Manitoba. Hi, guys. Hello. Hello. Unmute. Come chat with us. It's more fun when we can hear you, I promise. Here we are. Wants to work. Thinking about
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi. Do you have a question for Preet?
Navrig, if you don't mind, please.
Oh, me? I have 2 questions. Did you see any animals?
You know what? I saw one animal on my second trip, and I saw a bird in like day 11, and that is it. I've only ever seen one bird in Antarctica. There are penguins in Antarctica, but I already knew that I wouldn't see any on the route that I was going. So sadly, just the one bird.
Hey, one bird is special, but testament to how remote and sort of incredible a feat it is that you see one animal on this 1,100 kilometer journey. And what was your second question? We will come back to your class for others in a minute, but what's your second one first?
Oh, my second one was, how did you fall asleep?
How did I fall asleep?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So I actually had an eye mask, and I had that because the 24-hour daylight, it would get through, especially on sunny days as sun would come through. And I'll be honest, I was tired. So I have a roll mat in my tent and a sleeping bag. And I have to say, from experiences with the army, I'm quite used to sleeping on a roll mat and a sleeping bag anyway. And if I was cold, I would have a Nalgene water bottle. And you remember I said I'd boil my water in the kettle. I'd fill that with boiling hot water, and I'd put it in my sleeping bag and have it at my feet. So then it would warm my feet up. And then with the other one, I would hug it and go to sleep. So I had a few hot water bottles to help me sleep as well.
So my wife does this in a perfectly warm house. So it's good to know that it works in Antarctica as well. The hot water bottle is a very helpful tool. DeWitt Middle School, you guys are ending your day. Well, we're going to say, or class, we're going to say hello before you go. Do you have a quick question before you have to run off?
Yes.
Okay, Chad, get out of there.
All right.
Chad.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
What do we think? No? I'm glad you're that excited. If you guys got to go, that's totally cool. Thank you so much for joining. Jerusalem Elementary, Miss Swanksy's class. Welcome in, guys. Hi, 4th graders. Welcome back. Hello.
All right, hold it up and ask, Manny.
When did you start to ski?
Well, that's a really good question. So I tried skiing. I think I was probably about 24, 25, and I was terrible. And I just tried it and I wasn't very good at all. So then in 2020, I tried skiing. It's almost like I say it's walking, like you're trying to glide. So I wasn't going down, I was going up. And that was my first time having that experience, like actually like trying to get that glide. Now, I'll be honest, I think when I did my first trip, I think I was practically walking on skis. And then I've tried to get a little bit better at gliding. But yes, so I think mid-20s was the first time. And then 2020 when I tried to practice a little bit to get better.
I think this is a really important message, and it's one you keep coming back to over the course of the broadcast, which is that, you know, you can start late. You don't need to have all these skills. You don't need to have a desire from when you're 4 years old. You can pick up an idea and really run with it, literally and figuratively, and accomplish amazing things. So I'm really glad we got that question. Thanks, guys. Great. We're going to head to Stratford, Ontario, one of the loveliest towns. If you ever want to come to Stratford, Ontario, we have the best plays in the world. I used to go there all the time. Miss Cork, they want to know a bunch of things. Did you bring any extra equipment, like a backup compass? One doesn't work. We talked about the toilet paper incident of your journey, but any other things you can share with us about equipment?
Really good question. So yes, I did. I had 2 compasses. I had 3 ski poles. So I did bring extras. Some things I didn't bring extra. So for example, I didn't bring an extra tent because the tent, you know, I don't want to carry that extra weight with me. And I want to say your tent shouldn't blow away, but on my first trip, it actually did. And luckily I grabbed it, but that would have been game over. So I make sure that it's really dug into the ground before I'm putting the poles in, and it goes up so it doesn't blow away. But yes, I take extra equipment. Make sure I have, you know, enough fuel, maybe a little bit extra just in case. I take I take 1 pair of extra underwear. So that's it. I have my underwear and then I have a spare pair in case there's any accidents. But I change my liners in my underwear every few days. But I do literally anything I can to save weight. So the extras are things in case something breaks, or I'll take extra fuel pump for my stove. I make sure I have an extra stove in case I'm having an issue. So I do have extras with me. And then I take different medications with me that hopefully I won't need. But just in case, like different types of antibiotics in case I get ill. But yes, quite a few different extras.
I'm so glad you mentioned this sort of balance between wanting to have redundancy and weight, because on big ocean expeditions, a lot of expeditions that we feature in these broadcasts, people do bring like 2 and 3 of everything. And that's a luxury when you have a ton of space, but you can't actually do that when you're going to the pole, especially unsupported.
It's so expensive. It's expensive. It's so heavy, the sled. Like you have to carry it all. You don't want to take that.
So you have a half toothbrush and it becomes a quarter toothbrush at some point. It's very, I'm going to harp on something for a second before I go back to our 2A04 class, which is if you'd missed the tent, so say it goes to fly away and you can't catch it, what do? You're stuck there in the middle of the Antarctic plateau with nothing. So you call someone, hopefully, maybe.
Yes. So do you remember that company I told you that they were the ones who said I couldn't do the first trip because the crossing because I didn't have the experience. So they're the people who are dropping me off and picking me up on the ice. I carry a satellite phone, and actually I keep it in my top left pocket with my toilet paper says as well. And I check in with them every day so they know that I'm safe, and I do it at the same time every day. Now, if something serious happened, like I lost my tent, I would call them. I mean, first I would probably dig a hole in the snow and try and get myself in like a, you know, kind of a safe space, especially if it's a very windy day as well, and out of that. And then I'd request pickup. Pickup can take, you know, like between 1 and 3 days. And that depends on weather, if I'm honest with you. So what you do need as well, if, you know, you are in the worst case, think about what can I do to like look after myself. So I have my sled with things. So it would be like, you know, what else can I do? Sometimes people carry like a bivy bag, which is like a safety bag that you could potentially get in as well. So, I mean, obviously you want to not lose your tent, but if you do, it'd probably be the end of that trip. And it's just making sure you can keep yourself safe until you can be collected.
And this is where all that preparation comes in when you're standing in Norway against the epic hurricane forward looking wind. So I'm really glad we covered that. Thank you, Preet. We're going to take 3 more questions because time flies and you're having fun. That's the joy of these broadcasts. We get through a lot together. So 2A04, I'm coming to you first. Miss Swangstu will wrap up with you after a YouTube question. But come on in Winnipeg first. Hey, guys.
What's your inspiration?
Ooh.
So what's my inspiration?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great question. So I mentioned my niece who's 12, and I I think she's a big part of my inspiration. So I'll be honest, growing up, there weren't role models, or people that I thought I want to be like that person, or that many people that encouraged me to do a lot more, or made me believe I could. And I think when Simran was born, I immediately thought, I just want her to be able to do whatever she wants and believe that she can, and try it. So she's a big part of my inspiration. And I always name my sled after her when I do these trips. And it's really nice to have her name on the sled that I take out to the trips as well. And then at some point it became, bigger than that as well. I thought, well, if I can inspire Simran, maybe I could inspire more people to do stuff too. And when I say stuff, it's anything. When I'm talking with schools, I say it could be putting your hand up in class. It could be speaking in front of the class. It could be making a new friend. It could be trying a new subject. All of those things can be pushing out of your comfort zone. So it can be absolutely anything. And, and then my trips, it just got bigger for me, like Antarctica. And what's so cool now is when I think of really big stuff, I'm like, oh, maybe I could do it, because that confidence has grown. So, but yeah, Simran, I would say, is a big part of my inspiration.
Well, I certainly have no doubt that you could accomplish anything. We look forward to having you back on in a future broadcast, and you've summited all the world's mountains or gone to space or something. It's very exciting. Out of curiosity, before we go to our other questions, does Simran want to do any adventure-y things right now? Have you?
I think so. Probably not to that. She likes camping. So when we camp in the back garden, she enjoys doing that.
Lovely.
And And to be honest, I take her to do stuff that I never did. For example, I'd never done any horse riding, but we've been once or twice, just ad hoc, just because I want it to be the norm to do something different, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And first time I ever went camping, I was 19, and that was with the army. So
trial by fire camping. That's very fun. Oh, thank you for answering that. Miss Course Class, they wanted to know, are you going back to Antarctica? Do you have another big adventure plan? What's next for you?
I actually am going back to Antarctica, but to work this time. So I will be going back this year, which I'm really excited about, and hopefully more adventures. But I need to do the planning, and I'll be honest, trying to get money for trips is one of the hardest things. So whatever my next big trip is, I want to make sure I get the funding first. So I'm working on that.
Yeah, very, very cool. And I want to note, so it's so fun that you're going back, because I've spoken to many Antarctic adventurers at this point, and there's literally no place on Earth that gets in people's blood more than Antarctica. When people go, everybody wants to go back. I've yet to run across someone who's been and they're like, I'm done. That was awful. I hated every minute of it. Everyone's like, yes, can't wait. Drop everything. Go. So I hope our students, if you get the chance to go to Antarctica, it's expensive, but it is possible for people to go on tourist expeditions now. I've never been. It's one of my all-time dream places. And as you saw with Preet, even if you're facing epic winds and skiing for 30 plus days, it is well worth every single bit of the adventure. Preet, we're going to take one more question from our class before we wrap up. Time flies when you're having fun. So Miss Wangju, come on back in and take us away. Oh, how did you get hurt?
How'd you get hurt?
Thank you. That's a great question. So I got an injury called polar thigh. Now, the reason it's called polar thigh is it quite commonly happens on your inner thighs, but I got it on my calf. And the wind and the cold kind of got through my 3 layers, and it started to break down my skin. And it, on images of it, it kind of got it looked like a bruise, and then it got darker and it scabbed over. And luckily, it didn't go into muscle. It's not frostbite; it's something different to that. But that was what the injury was. And then when I had surgery, I basically had a skin graft, and they took skin from a different area, so on my left thigh, upper thigh, and then they've put that bit of skin on my calf. So I actually have a scar on my left calf now, and it's a year and a half post surgery. So that scar will stay, and I've named her Elsa. So Elsa. And then my neck injury, I got, I think because I was carrying the heavy weight and pulling forward, and I was struggling at the start with the weather. So I think that's how I injured my neck. And as a physiotherapist as well, I think I knew what it was. I just struggled to get it better because I didn't have any days off when I'm on these trips. And that's because I'm in a rush, or I want to keep going and get to the pole.
Preet, this has been so much fun. I cannot wait for our kids to learn even more about you. I'm going to link in your website, Instagram, more to all our classrooms when we're done. And for our teachers, we didn't include this in the presentation by design, but I will send you a picture of what polar thigh looks like if you want to see her calf at the end of that adventure. So if you want to show your kids, you can. It's gruesome, but fascinating. Preet, before we wrap up together and say farewell, is there any last message you want to leave all our classrooms with before we say goodbye today?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And people often ask me, what can I do? And I say, start. Whatever it is, pick something next week that you want to do that pushes out of your comfort zone that you might be a little bit nervous to do, and try it. And that start could be anything. Remember, my start was Googling, how do you get to Antarctica? That was my start. So it can be absolutely anything. But you can do it. And it's okay to be nervous and scared. I get nervous and scared all the time, literally on everything I do. So that's completely natural, but try it anyway.
Preet, there is no better message than that. It's one we've been hearing all week long. We've got a few other amazing adventures coming next week, and I can't wait for them to say the same as well. So thank you so much for being so exciting and inspiring, spending some of your time with us today. And as we do to wrap up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our Manitoba class. I'm going to bring in our Ohio class. Our Michigan class. You guys can say bye too. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye now, guys, and we'll see you all soon.
Everybody get in.
Farewell,
Get in.
guys. Bye.